Ready.
Welcome to episode 53 of the Go Get 'em Agility podcast. My name is Margaret Hughes. I'm your host. And once again, I am in my car. So this is part 2 or part B. So I'm going through the different sections, A through G, the different sections of my foundation training, what I teach new handlers, what I do for myself with my own dog. And so part A was recalls to heel. Now we're on part B, which is side changes. But before I go there, I have a section at the very front of my foundation book. And if you ever want to see it, I haven't completely finished it, but I have a good chunk of it up online. So if you ever want to see it, you can print out your own copies and create your own notebook. All right, so at the very beginning of my workbook is cues. So I wanted to make sure that I covered the cues that I think are in agility, just give a little bit of a understanding of what they're used for and when you need them. All right, here we go. Eye contact, hand signals, shoulder kind of dropping back, the shoulder dropping back or pulling forward, motion, location not only in location to your dog, but also location to an obstacle, foot direction in my world. So this is, Linda Mecklenburg doesn't mention foot, toes, the direction the foot is facing or the toes are facing. She uses more the line of motion. She talks more about that, which, is essentially your feet. But I think that sometimes emphasis on where your toes are pointed make a big difference to the dog. So I'm adding in toes and then verbal cues. So when we say cues, C-U-E-S, all of them are cues. So your motion is a cue, your location is a cue, eye contact, hand signals, shoulder rotation, foot positioning or direction. Did I say verbal cues already? Let me go through those just one more time, make sure I get them all. Motion, location, eye contact, hand signals, shoulder rotation, direction of foot, and verbal cues. Yeah, those are all of your cues. And the verbal cues that you give is 100% dependent on how you want to instruct your dog verbally. You do not have to have verbal cues, but they are very, very useful in discriminations. They're very useful and necessary if you want to do distance. But it's one of the hardest ones for dogs to learn. So there are a couple of cues that are natural to the dog. So all the cues that are natural to the dog: motion, location, eye contact, and toes are in there because of they're associated with the motion and location. Cues that are, and shoulder rotation is also natural for the dog. Cues that are not natural for the dog include hand signals and verbals. So throughout my training with my students, I am constantly talking about all those cues and either the combination of them or them in isolation. So when I'm pretty sure I already did a podcast on this, and so I'll pull that up. I can't remember what number it was. I'm not home to look it up. I'll pull that up, and if I did do a podcast on the cues in agility, then I will put it into the show notes. But I'll do a rundown here. All right, so motion, either forward, backward, sideways, fast, slow. All of that gives your dog an indication of direction and speed. Location indicates obstacle, turning, and it can indicate speed depending on how close you are to an obstacle, the location, if you're on the takeoff side of the obstacle or the landing side of the obstacle, it can indicate speed to the dog as well. For shoulder rotation, when we roll our shoulders back towards our dog and open up our chest, we're usually asking our dogs to come into us. So inviting them in, and within that is generally our hand is back behind us. So we're asking our dog to come in towards our hand, in towards our body, used on like a serpentine. Also opening up that shoulder if you're doing a front cross on them to invite them into the new hand.
Shoulders give dogs information on direction and also turning.
Eye contact is critical for side changes, which side to stay on, which side to run on. So eye contact indicates which side to stay on or which side to change to. It also can indicate for the dog to come into you, so convergence. When our dogs don't want to come in, direct eye contact with them, or like really giving them a lot of eye contact, can indicate to them, I know what I'm doing, trust me, come into me. If we're staring straight forward, we're indicating to our dogs for them to go forward as well. So direct eye contact on the dog and looking down towards where you want them to come into indicates usually convergence, but looking forward indicates for them to go forward as well. And here's a little side note as far as what the dogs are looking at. So when dogs are looking at something, generally they'll travel in that direction as well. So if they're looking straight at you, then they're not obstacle focused, and they may start crashing into you or jumping up at you or missing obstacles because they're so focused on you. So you noticing what the dog is looking at can help get them back onto an obstacle. So if they're not looking at the jump, they can't take the jump. And so learning to see what they're seeing, a skill that takes a while for handlers to see and read in the moment when they're trying to judge their own location and motion and all that. But the faster that you can recognize my dog's not looking at the obstacle I need them to look at, the faster you can get them back on there with a hand signal, a verbal, a step towards the correct obstacle. And so that can help your dog go from handler focus to back into obstacle focus. Dogs also do what is called environmental drift, what I call environmental drift, and that is when they're coming over a jump, instead of looking at you, they're looking forward at the next obstacle. They are looking at the ring crew or the audience members. And so if you're on a circle and they're looking outward of that circle, they're going to drift outward of that circle. And so if your handling plan has them on a perfect circle lined up for the next obstacle and they start doing environmental drift, they can drift to the right, the opposite side of the obstacle that you want. All right, so I did motion, I did location, I did eye contact, I did hand signals. It's also a side change or a side cue. So if my right hand is out, generally means come to my right side. If my left hand's out, means come to my left side. If my fingers are pinched, so this is me personally. Now you can train your hand signals. Remember that these hand signals are a trained behavior. And so dogs don't naturally come up to your hands. We have to teach them to come and understand that hands are valuable. And so I train certain hand signals equal certain things. So if my hand is flat and upright, like I'm holding a piece of pizza or a whole pizza. So I'm delivering a whole pizza pie, a whole pizza. I call it a pizza pie. So you may have caught that in the last podcast. What I'm talking about is I'm delivering an entire pizza to a table at a restaurant. So how would I carry that pizza from the kitchen to the customer's table? My palm would be up, my hand would be flat, and when that is the case, generally my dog is behind me. All right, now they may be in front of me and I'm inviting them to me as well. So I'm inviting my dog to me with an open hand, that is, my palm is up. And as they get to me, I may rotate it to go into their nose and fingers pointed down. But initially, I'm inviting them in. I will do an open hand, upright open hand for my threadle slice work. I'll extend an open upright hand on a release from a start line, generally, if they're coming down a long line of jumps. Or the other way that I do is kind of a partial open hand to the side of me. So that indicates that you're going to stay out away from me a little bit, but I want you to take this jump. And so my palm is still up, but my fingers start to curl. Sometimes you'll see me point, and that generally is we're in our normal bubble together. I'm not calling you in. I'm not pushing you out. Just take this jump or obstacle that's next to me. The other hand signal that I use is my hand forward, palm down, and either pointing or just hands, fingers just kind of natural, no clenched fist, but just fingers just kind of natural, pointing with one finger. Sometimes I do two. Sometimes I just have an open hand forward. And that the more open my hand is, the further away I want my dog. Generally, that's what I do. And I do that naturally. So that just comes naturally to me. It's not something that I was really conscious about. But over the years, learning what works in just basic obedience and then what works for agility. So kind of pay attention if your hand is not working, if your hand signal's not getting you what you want. Maybe modify it to see if it just makes more sense to a dog. So one thing that I do for my threadle work, well, my dog has understood that through the recall to heel position, that an open hand equals if it's down and inviting him in, so it's at his nose level. I've trained him that an open flat hand will have a cookie in it, and so he knows that come to the hand that's open, and he's learned that through the recall to heel process. So in the beginning, when I first started teaching Eli recalls to heel, which I think was roughly 16 weeks maybe, I started some very, very simple ones. He would rush to my feet. And that's very natural. They want to rush to your motion. And so they grab your foot line as opposed to your hand line. And so over time, he learned that the hand is the valuable thing to go to by me just slowly introducing him that, nope, target this hand, and I put it right in his nose, and then I take him to where I wanted. So in the very, very beginning, he was not naturally driving to my open hand. I had to teach him over time that there is a cookie in that hand and drive to it. And so now, if I have an open hand, he will come into that open hand. So recall to heel helps with training that hand signal. My other hand signal is a pinched fingers. So, and I'll have a cookie pinched in that finger. And essentially what that means is come into that pinched finger. And I use my pinched fingers for my threadle work. I use my pinched fingers to help teach my rear cross in the beginning. That is my lure. Whenever I'm just luring him for circle work, for turn work, I will use a pinched finger to help lure him, and he has learned that a pinched finger indicates follow my hand, and when I clench those fingers up into a fist and pull it up away from his nose, it means it's not for you anymore, and either we end, or more likely, because I mostly do this in training, I only really do it in training, is go obstacle focus. And so I can lure him to where I need him, release his nose from my hand, and ask him to go obstacle focus. But again, that took time for him to learn that. And I was listening to, I believe it was Hannah Branigan, Hannah Branigan. She was talking about reinforcement and latency. And within that podcast, she talked about this exact thing. So she talked about how she teaches her dogs to lure. And then if she clenches her fist up, I think that's what she said. If she clenches her fist up, then the dog knows to do something else. So that the cookie's no longer for them. I can't remember exactly what context she was talking about. I think she was talking verbals. I think she was working sits downs and so on. She does a lot of obedience, so she's probably talking more obedience, heels and downs and all that. And so I'll link her podcast into here because she gave a very good description, probably much, much better than I am. And she gave a great description of how she does that. And I say that knowing what she was talking about. So it made total sense to me the way that she said it. So hopefully it will make sense to you as well. So how else are my hand signals? Oh, transferring hands. So one thing that students struggle with, and just new people in general struggle with hand signals and luring. So this is luring, this is early foundation stuff. Transferring a dog from one hand that has a cookie into another hand. So one thing that I have taught Eli and all of my dogs, I mean, this is a really, really good skill, and I encourage you to practice it. Dogs will totally practice this with you, is to have 2 cookies one in each hand, and teach them how to transfer from one hand to the other without losing them, or having them draw back on the hand that they're initially on. Have them learn how to pull off onto a new hand without transferring back to the old hand. And so have 2 cookies, one in each hand, both of them pinched, and draw your dog across your body, turn them, and then as you want to transfer them to the new hand, bring in your new hand and literally touch your old hand and get them onto your new hand. And you kind of need to learn to feel this, because you'll feel them transfer onto the new hand. And as they transfer onto the new hand, your hands go in opposite directions. So your old hand that you want them to come off of starts to pick up slowly, but more importantly, the new hand that you've got them on pulls them in the new direction you want them to go and rewards them. Right? This is kind of important. Learning how to transfer isn't just about leaving the hand, it's about getting rewarded for leaving the hand, the other hand. And so people say to me all the time, he can't work because I have a cookie in his nose. Well, they can. They just need to be taught how to do it. They need to be taught that a little bit of delayed reward and learning how to transfer from one hand to another. And this is a very valuable skill because we use it in our front cross work, we use it in our rear cross work, we use it all over the place in early training, teaching them how to go around a cone and transferring them both directions. It's just a really good skill. So teach them, one, how to lure. Can you walk your dog around your entire kitchen and living room, both of them combined? Can you walk the perimeter with them mugging your hand, or what we call it, cookie transport? So can they move throughout your entire kitchen on a lure? And when I say that, certainly give them little pieces as you're going, but don't disengage with them completely to reload. Right? How long can you keep a lure going? How long will they go? So my goal would be to go 1/4 of my kitchen on one cookie, then 1/2 of my kitchen on one cookie, 3/4 of my kitchen on one cookie, until I'm able to do my entire kitchen on one cookie and then add in the living room or the family room or the eating area. So just build up the ability to lure on one cookie. You have to be savvy on what kind of a cookie you use. What else? So motion, location, hand signals, shoulder. I can't remember if I mentioned for the shoulder, so I'm just going to say it again just in case. If I'm dropping my shoulder back, I'm inviting my dog in, or generally my dog's behind me. I might be doing a front cross though. Or if I'm rolling my shoulder forward, generally means my hand is forward as well, which also means that I'm driving my dog forward, straight, or out. And just while we're on the subject, forward means straight forward, so like a go, and then out means lateral, stay out there, or move laterally away from me, or stay laterally out away from me. All right, let's talk about toes. So point toes, where our toes are pointed. Let's talk feet and dog leg versus offside leg. So how we position our feet can matter in the early stages of agility. In early stages of learning obstacles and driving towards obstacles, our dog leg is pretty dang powerful and useful. So where we point our dog leg, now which leg is the dog leg? Take a guess. It's the side the dog is on. Our dog leg helps to send. So when we're sending forward or sending to a jump, we're using our dog leg to help direct the direction we want them to go. And generally, our dog leg is pointed almost in the same direction as our hand. There are exceptions to that. So there are times when you will send them out with the foot and indicate where you're going next with the hand. And a lot of times when we're using our feet, we're actually pointing our feet towards the correct path that we want our dog to stay on. So sometimes we're pointing at the obstacle, but sometimes we're pointing at the path in front of the obstacle. So where we want our dogs to take off from or stay out on a line. So if a dog has obstacle commitment, sometimes it's about directing their path out far enough to stay on that correct obstacle. And you don't even have to be near that line, the actual line that your dog's going to run on. You just have to be pointing in that direction, and or pointing your dog leg, your toes in that direction until you see commitment, and then you can pull in the new direction or begin to step away. You can also be laterally moving away from them, but still pointing in the direction you want them to stay on. So our dog leg helps to send dogs out to obstacles, and our offside leg, if we pull it away from the dog, generally means for the dog to turn. So if you think about how we do a front cross, we plant our dog leg, we step off with our offside leg, and we begin to pivot and rotate in the new direction. So that offside leg is indicating to the dog, we're turning. We're moving in this new direction. You can also use your off leg to help with convergence. So if we're working on pulling the dog into us, we'll use the off leg as the more dominant leg to help pull the dog away, as opposed to pushing with the onside leg. So we push with the onside leg, pull with the offside leg to help navigate the dog's path. And always keep in mind that dogs naturally pull into us if they're in normal handler obstacle focus. So there's always exceptions to that, and we can train our dogs away from that by teaching them forward focus and teaching them commitment, teaching them distance. So all of those things, we can counteract all the natural pulling that they do. We can train them away from that if we want to, but sometimes it'll start to happen naturally. The stronger the dog gets in agility, the more obstacle focus they get, which means that they're willing to go out and get obstacles that you don't necessarily desire. All right, the last one is verbal cues. And verbal cues are one of the least trained in Daisy Peel's 6 cues, she talks about working from the ground up. So any cues that are given towards the bottom of your body are going to be stronger than any cues given at the top of your body. Verbal cues would be one of the least salient to the dog. I'm going to disagree with her on eye contact. I think eye contact is crucial, or at least the side of your face is really important for side changes, or for, which side to keep your dog on. So I think that your face can override your feet. But in general, if we were to take what makes the most salient, what is the most salient to the dogs, what are they paying attention to the most, it is from the ground up. So, but I think eye contact overrides hand signals, in my opinion. There's probably exceptions. Yeah, there are exceptions to that. All right, so creating your dog's dictionary on what their verbal cues are is 100% up to the handler. You want cues that are going to make sense to you as a handler. You want them to have definition. What does this cue mean to me? How specific are you getting in that cue? So for my jump cues, I think I have upwards of 8 different verbal jump cues. I also have 2 different tunnel cues. I also have a tunnel break cue, but that's a hand signal. So my tunnel break cue is a hand signal. My dreadle tunnel is one word. My regular tunnel is another word. I have 2 separate words for my contacts. My teeter has its own word, and my dog walk and my A-frame have the same word. But I do know people also do separate words for their dog walk and their A-frame, especially if one is running and one is not. You need 2 different verbals there. My tire jump, I flip back and forth on my tire jump. So sometimes I say tire, sometimes I say jump. Tires, I don't know that I've ever seen the tire be in a discrimination. So there's really no need for it to have its own verbal. It's just a normal jump cue, or it's just another jump. So I also don't have separate words for my spread jumps. So some people do. They have big jump, jump big. I don't. Mine is just a normal jump, whether it be a long jump, broad jump, wall jump, triple jump, double jump. Panel jump would be, panel jump looks different. It's the same as a jump cue. Table has its own word, if you still have a table in your classes. Some people have turning cues. I did train turning cues. However, I've not used them on course yet. I haven't felt the need for them yet. I've only had one time where I'm like, maybe I should use the word there. But I just don't feel that I've trained them enough to put them on course yet. I don't think that they're very solid yet. And so I know that I can utilize my motion to get the same turn and a hand signal to help get the same turn that I need. So I haven't gone with directionals. However, the further away my dog gets from me, the more the directionals are going to need to come into play. Especially if I'm taking out my motion. So if I'm taking away motion, then I would be required to pull in either big hand signals or verbals, or both. But I personally love to run with my dog. I'm not a stand in the middle type of a competitor. I love to run with my dog. I love to stand there in practice. I like to see if I can get it, but I don't enjoy the confusion it causes for a lot of dogs that are on the way to good training. So there you go. Maybe one day I'll enjoy it, especially as I get older. But even for those competitors that are motion challenged, that they just can't move very fast, you don't need to move fast. You just need to move. All right, so just little steps, even small steps in the direction you want your dog to go, help indicate direction. And if you take that away completely, you're reliant on other cues to take its place. When we take one cue away, we need to insert other cues to help give the dog information. And how do we know that they're not getting the information? Lots of ways. Lots and lots of ways. Spinning, head checking. So head checking is when the dog looks at you either over an obstacle or on the landing side of an obstacle and says, "Where are we going next?" Ideally, you're answering that question before they ask that question. So head checking, spinning, them looking like a fish going upriver. So they kind of sway back and forth. They run kind of in this river fashion. That's them going right, left, which way do you want me to go? What else do? They'll check out. Some dogs will check out and start sniffing, but what else do? Well, they just go and start picking obstacles. So they start guessing. You'll see them just like this one, they run over this one and handle it. No, this way. They run over to the next one that's closest to them. So they start searching, kind of a guessing game of hot and cold, and until the handler stops giving them negative information and starts giving them, yes, that's the one. They will drift wide or converge in on you. So if you're not giving them the correct information, then you'll get what you're cueing, right? Either they'll drift in on you, or they'll drift away from you, one, because you failed to call their name, so they keep just that natural motion line that they're on, or they'll parallel your motion, which if you want convergence, you got to talk to them. If you want divergence, you got to talk to them or indicate to them, give them some sort of cue that says come in or go away. If you want turns into or away from you, you need to give those signals. So the further away you get from your dog, the more important it is for them to have those verbals in play so that they can turn the correct direction in the location that they are. Well, this really turned into a podcast on cues, not on side changes. But all of these cues are so important for your side changes. So important. So I think I'm going to combine these two podcasts. So the side changes that we have are the front cross, the blind cross, and the rear cross. Those are your three main side changes. Within those so let me just talk about the front cross. The front cross is a side change where you are rotating towards your dog. So your dog's nose and your chest will always have the ability to see each other as long as the dog's not in the tunnel. But when you're looking at your dog, when you're visualizing how your dog is in motion in relation to you, you're always have your chest towards your dog. And one of the hardest things I think for the front cross is the notion that it can be on any angle, on any line of motion, and it can also be static. So you can do the front cross literally in place. You do that at the pause table, you can do it at a tunnel, you can do it also on a jump. So if the dog's taking the jump and wrapping the wing coming back into you, you can literally send them with your left hand and pick them up with your right hand. Right? So that's just a static front cross without ever moving. You can do that. Front cross, everything has exceptions within these side changes. Every single one. So I'm going to talk in generals, and I'm going to talk about their strongest indications that they do for the dog. So the front cross is usually on bends and adding collection. So if we want our dogs to turn a little bit tighter, generally we are best suited to do a front cross. If we need to keep eye contact on our dogs, remember eye contact indicates stay with me, don't leave me. So if we need to keep our dogs with us and direct the line of motion that they're moving on, then the front cross is the better choice than the blind cross. Especially if there's an off-course option, then having a front cross is generally the stronger of the two. If we want a turn off of an obstacle, the front cross is generally the better of the side changes to pick. You can do a front cross on a straightaway, but man, is it ever difficult. So if you're on a straightaway, then the blind cross is generally the better choice. So a blind cross is where you are in front of your dog and you're putting your back to your dog for a moment. So your dog will see your backside and cross from one hand to the other without seeing the hands connect. So with the front cross, the hands could always connect. The hands can always touch. With a blind cross, they don't. There's never a hand connection in the blind cross. Literally the hand is up on the left one moment and then up on the right the next moment. So I kind of think of it as when the left hand drops, the right hand pushes out. The blind cross, in my opinion, is the better choice for handlers that struggle with vertigo or rotating out of the front cross. But you have to learn how to drop your shoulder back and grab eye contact with your dog to make sure that they saw the side change in time for the next obstacle. So kind of this sweeping motion that the hands do as if they're holding a bar and they can't touch in the blind cross. The blind cross is great for straightaways. It's great if you need a fast side change. So I think it's one of the faster side changes that we can do. You do have to be in front of your dog. We call it getting the dog up the butt if you're not fast enough. I think that the blind cross is one of the scarier options for handlers, but I also think that it's one of the better options for a lot of handlers. It just gives you that extra fraction of a second that most handlers need to move forward down the course. If it's going to be on a turn, the handler has to understand the line of motion that they're putting the dog on. And so always remember, going back to motion, always remember that dogs want to parallel your motion. And the only time that they deviate off of paralleling your motion is through eye contact and hand signals directing them in a different direction. So if you just ran down the street, your dog would parallel your motion as you move, right? I mean, these are dogs that are hanging with you. They're just running next to you. If you're jogging, you've taught your dog to jog next to you, they will jog parallel to your path with a tendency to pull in. So just like a car, if you have a car that's off, you let go of the wheel, does it pull to the right? Does it pull to the left? Well, dogs always pull into the handler. So regardless of which side you're on, they're going to pull into you. But they're going to run your parallel path as long as you keep moving. Right? When you stop, they'll pull into you. When you're doing a blind cross, the blind cross, the front cross, and the rear cross, you want to be on the same line, exactly the same line, generally. It's just how and when you're on that line. So if you draw a line between two obstacles, you're going to do that side change on that line or over the top of that line. So you kind of intersect that line and you're intersecting the dog's path, right? So the dog takes one path, you're taking another path, and you're going to cross over that path, the line that you've drawn between the two obstacles. So I call it the front cross, blind cross line, but it really is also the rear cross line as well. It's just the timing of when you do that side change. So the blind cross, you're doing the side change before the dog gets to the path. The front cross, you're doing the side change before the dog gets to the path. And the rear cross, you're doing the side change after the dog gets to the path. So you're intersecting afterwards to indicate a side change or a change of direction. So did I finish everything on the blind cross? I have a whole podcast on blind crosses. Me and Em went into a whole thing on blind crosses, so I'll link that as well can't remember if we did one on front crosses. I think we did. Yeah, I think we did. So anyway, I'll link those as well. The rear cross. The rear cross is by far the hardest one for the dogs. They have to understand their mechanics of turning away from you, and the handler has to understand how to cue them for obstacle commitment. And so the dog has to have learned already about commitment and how to commit to an obstacle, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in Sen's conversation. But if the dog isn't committed to the obstacle yet, then that's where you start, because you need the dog to stay committed to the obstacle as you drift further behind them for the rear cross. The rear cross is a turning cue. It is a turning cue. And so the closer you are to the obstacle that you're doing the rear cross on, the tighter that turn is going to be. And if you want them to go straight, then you need to be indicating straight cueing way before you get to the rear cross. The line you take off of the jump is the curvature that the dog will take on landing. If you're driving on a very shallow angle to the center of the bar, then the dog's going to jump in that shallower angle on that bar. If you're coming in real tight on the bar, so if you're at a 90 degree, I think I need to explain this sitting down. I need to draw it out. So I'm going to end there. I'll do a whole thing on rear crosses. Yeah, I'm going to end there. Part 2 of part B.
Ready.